Good morning. We are going to do a little presentation here about Hamlet. Some of it's context, some of it is characters, but I want to go ahead and kind of run you guys through this, and you're going to have a couple of days to kind of ruminate on this since you're doing testing this week. Also, for the record, you do not have to grab a sheet of paper, as you might see on the screen right now. There's no assignment connected with this. This is all just background info, stuff that's going to help you understand what's going on when we start Hamlet this week. Okay, so let me actually make this bigger. I'm just going to talk about this a little bit. You do not have to do this assignment, mostly because I think it's really weird to think about. It's asking you to grab a sheet of paper, write your father's first name or the name of your closest male role model. Don't make it a, never mind. Write your mother's first name or the name of your closest female role model. Write the first name of your father or person A, their brother or best friend. Now, cross out your father's name. In this scenario, he has died. That's why I don't actually want you to do this, because it's a very dark thing to think about. But it's very relevant to Hamlet, for the record. He's dead. Now draw a line linking your mother and your uncle or father's best friend. So you're away at college or somewhere when you receive a call. Your father has unexpectedly died. When you get home, you discover that your mom has grown very close to your uncle or your father's best friend, and they plan to get married next month. That's really quick if you're just finding out your father has died. What's your reaction? What questions are running through your mind? What actions do you take? Like I said, I don't want you to write this down, but definitely think about it, because that is a crazy idea. The idea that your mom would like immediately move on to your father's brother or best friend, definitely I think would sort of deteriorate your trust in your mom. You might feel a little bit betrayed, and I would certainly think that you'd have some upset feelings towards the uncle or best friend. But this is more or less the inciting incident for Hamlet. This is kind of what happens at the very beginning. Hamlet is actually Hamlet Jr. His father's name was also Hamlet. So we have King Hamlet and Prince Hamlet, and King Hamlet has just died. And his wife, Gertrude, the queen, has very quickly remarried. And the person she has remarried was her husband's brother, and his name is Claudius, King Claudius. He is the king now. All these thoughts and so many more are exactly what are swirling in Prince Hamlet's head, and it does mean so many more. Hamlet is a big thinker. He's not a big doer. He has to kind of ruminate on ideas for a long time before he actually acts on any of it. So let's look at a few things about the tragedy of Hamlet. First of all, let's look at the setting. This is happening in the late medieval period, which is probably a little bit before Shakespeare's actual time. So he's writing as if this was in the past. But there are a lot of productions that place the play in modern times, which is kind of fun. And it takes place in Denmark, one of our Beowulf settings. Which is why he is called the Prince of the Danes. Danes are people from Denmark, and I think I probably mentioned that back in the day when we were doing Beowulf. But Elsinore is the name of the castle that they live in. Let's talk about some main characters. First of all, there's Hamlet. Obviously, he is the protagonist. He is the Prince of Denmark. He is in college, but he has returned, obviously, for his father's funeral or whatever, and to figure out what's going on. He is the son of Queen Gertrude and late King Hamlet, and he is the nephew of Claudius, the new king. Character-wise, he is very emo. He's like very melancholy. He just thinks that everything is terrible. He's kind of annoying. Not as annoying as Romeo. I actually really like Hamlet, but I think that if I were friends with him, I'd be like, can you shut up for 5 minutes? because he's a talker. He's a talker. And he wants to talk through all of his feelings at length, and it gets to be kind of a lot. He's also like, he's so good with insults though. Like he's very quick and witty and smart. He kind of gives off the air of like thinking he's the smartest person in the room at any given time, but he probably is the smartest person in any room. You have his best friend Horatio, who is a lot more pragmatic than Hamlet is. They have gone to college together. Horatio is very dedicated to Hamlet. They're like ride or die kind of friends. And I think he's really funny because he doesn't have, all of his lines are really short for the most part until the end, and he gets like a big long speech in the end. You have Queen Gertrude, who is Hamlet's mother, King Hamlet's widow, and has just married her brother-in-law, Claudius. I kind of want to hold off on telling you too much about Queen Gertrude just because I want to see how you guys feel about her, if you sympathize with her or if you think that she is maybe evil or just like shows bad judgment by marrying her brother-in-law, or just how you feel about her. King Claudius is the new ruler of Denmark. He has just married his dead brother's wife, and he doesn't really like or trust Hamlet. Well, the feeling is mutual, King Claudius. King Claudius is a bad guy. And for the record, when we read this, I have dibs on King Claudius. I don't know why he's my favorite character. He's terrible, but I just really like to read his part. So I'm going to be King Claudius. Then we have King Hamlet's ghost. Yes, there is a ghost in this story. He pops up and speaks to his son Hamlet. Then you have Ophelia, who is Hamlet's girlfriend. She's very sweet and innocent. She is a dutiful daughter. We'll meet her father in just a second. Her father is a member of King Claudius's court. She also is sort of a product of her time, meaning that women didn't have a lot of say in things back then. And she really relies on her father and her brother and Hamlet to kind of tell her what to do and make all her decisions for her. That doesn't necessarily make her a weak person. She might be a weak person, but you have to realize that back then, women just didn't have a whole lot of options. Then you have Laertes. He is Ophelia's brother. He's a college student in France. He is great at fencing. He is definitely a lot more of a doer than Hamlet is. Like they both are faced with a lot of decisions and like life events in this story, and Hamlet has to think through everything for a long time, and Laertes really doesn't. He just like he makes a decision and he moves on it. Polonius is the father of Ophelia and Laertes. He's a trusted advisor to King Claudius. He is very worried about Hamlet's relationship with Ophelia. None of that sounds bad. And Polonius is not necessarily a bad guy per se, but he's obviously like on King Claudius's side in most things. He's the advisor, and also he doesn't like the idea of Hamlet being with his daughter, but he's very nosy. He's such a busybody. He's always in everybody's business, whether they have actually asked him to be involved in their business or not. Fortinbras is the Prince of Norway, which is the neighboring country to Denmark. Fortinbras Sr., again, like there's kind of a parallel between Hamlet and Hamlet Sr., Fortinbras and Fortinbras Sr. King Hamlet Sr. killed Fortinbras Sr. in battle. So Fortinbras Jr., the new prince, well, he's always been a prince. He's kind of got a chip on his shoulder against Hamlet and Claudius because they're responsible for his father's death, or the former king was, and they're kind of in that place now. So he kind of presents a threat to Denmark's security. So not only is there like the personal drama going on, but there's kind of a national drama going on as well. That's Norway. That's Denmark. They're very close. You can kind of see where they are in the grand scheme of Europe. At first, Fortinbras wants to attack Denmark, and later he agrees to attack Poland instead, but he wants to travel through Denmark to get there. So, you know, he'd have to stop by. So is this based on real life? It might be inspired by this Danish myth called Hamlet, which is obviously just Hamlet scrambled up. That's an ancient story, and there are versions of it found in Byzantine, Greek, and Roman mythologies. It probably didn't actually happen. So a couple of important things to know: a foil, a literary foil, and I wonder if possibly Mr. Casey or Mr. Johnson talked with you guys about foils at some point. But a foil is a character who contrasts with another character, usually the protagonist, in order to highlight the particular qualities of the other character. So they've usually got some stuff in common, but their differences are made more apparent because they have these similarities. For instance, I don't know how many of you are like super into Harry Potter. I think you probably all know that I am. But Harry Potter's the protagonist, obviously. A good foil for him, you could definitely see Ron Weasley as being a foil for him, but I think even more so Draco Malfoy is a good foil because they sort of grew up, they grew up really differently, but they were born into similar situations, meaning like very well-to-do, respected wizarding families. But obviously Draco has like evil parents. He's got a lot of bad influences in his life, and he grew up really rich and spoiled and pampered. Whereas Harry has grown up, you know, with his aunt and uncle treating him horribly, and he grew up in the most humble of circumstances. And so I think that those two factors really affect the way that they make their choices. Draco's always trying to get ahead, which is why he's a Slytherin. He doesn't mind stepping on anybody to kind of be seen as the hero, which he never really gets to be. And Harry, on the other hand, is always trying to do right by everybody and make sure that he's doing the right thing. And I think that those similarities are kind of what make their differences really shine. So that's a good foil. Hamlet could potentially have several character foils. Ophelia, she's just very different from him in her personality, and tries to be sort of a moral center for him. Laertes, like I said, they both have big decisions. They're both born into noble families. I mean, obviously, Hamlet is the prince and Laertes is not, but they're both, you know, part of the aristocracy. But whereas Hamlet just stews on all of his decisions, has to think through everything, talk through everything, and rarely gets around to actually doing anything, Laertes sees a situation, he makes up his mind how he's going to handle it, and he handles it. He is much more of a doer. And then Fortinbras, obviously, I mentioned there was that parallel between Fortinbras and Hamlet. Both of their fathers are dead. Fortinbras Sr. killed Hamlet Sr. They're both princes. They both have, you know, the weight of a nation on them. And at one point, there will be actual foils, aka swords. There's a fencing scene. So keep an eye on how these characters reflect back Hamlet's flaws. Whoop. We're not going to look at the allusions to Julius Caesar because we have not read Julius Caesar. There are several conflicts going on. Man versus man, obviously there's a quest for power. There's a quest for justice. Hamlet trying to get justice for his father. Fortinbras versus Claudius. I mean, since Fortinbras has been killed, he's going to come into power. So those are kind of like the rulers of these two nations. And then Hamlet versus Claudius as well. There's man versus circumstances. He's part of this broken, corrupted family. He has a duty as a royal son, but he doesn't necessarily always want to deal with that. Man versus society. There's definitely an elite class versus working class struggle. There's some crazy treatment of women, Ophelia in particular. the king's desires versus people's needs, and we'll definitely see how that plays out. And then I don't want to talk too much about that because I don't want you to be spoiled for the play. And then man versus himself, a psychological conflict. Hamlet faces a lot of heavy doubts. You guys might be aware or familiar with the most famous soliloquy in this is "to be or not to be," and that's definitely Hamlet's heavy doubts. And we'll talk about what all that means. We're actually going to look really closely at that soliloquy when we get to it. Learning to conquer fear, and then Polonius also kind of, he gives this advice to his son Laertes: to thine own self be true, which is good advice, even if he is a nosy busybody. Best acting role ever. All these people played Hamlet. We would watch the Mel Gibson version, but I just don't know about watching movies and how that would even work now. So now you need to know what you need to know. We're not going to start today. I'm actually going to pause this for one moment, or try to. So I have just another couple of slides for you here to give you some ideas of like why this play was written and kind of the main themes and stuff. Ooh, come on now. Don't worry about Benedict Cumberbatch there. I would love to see him play Hamlet, but I haven't been able to get a hold of a copy of that, or it's not like streaming anywhere. He did that on Broadway, so I wonder if it's available on DVD. I'd buy that. So this is an important thing too, because like I mentioned, there's a ghost. King Hamlet's ghost shows up, I think in the first scene actually. So what did Shakespeare's audience think of ghosts? In Shakespeare's time, pretty much everybody did believe that ghosts were real and that they were either sent by God or the devil, probably to like give you a message or teach you a lesson. The trick was sort of figuring out which one sent the ghost. So when Hamlet opens the discussion of a ghost site, this is phrased really strangely. I didn't actually make this presentation. When Hamlet opens the discussion is one of a, oh, there should be a comma. When Hamlet opens, comma, the discussion is one of a ghost sighting and what that sighting means. Because again, they would have believed, like nobody's doubting that there was a ghost there. So is it a nice ghost or is it a bad ghost? And why is he here? So we're actually going to, I don't have to click the picture for this video because I have it up. It's very short, but this is about ghosts in Shakespeare.
For more about the works of Shakespeare, watch Shakespeare Uncovered.
Just kidding. Here we go.
Hi, this is Patrick Kilpatrick of the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company, and this is 60 Seconds Shakespeare. It seems that Shakespeare loved ghosts, loved putting them in his plays. They're in his early plays and his later plays. He completely changed the way ghosts were used on stage, or in 1960s sitcoms. There are ghosts all over Shakespeare's plays. Richard III, Macbeth, Hamlet, Henry VI, Part 2, Julius Caesar, and The Tempest all have ghosts. Even Juliet talks about seeing a ghost.
Look, methinks I see my cousin's ghost, seeking out Romeo.
Of course, earlier playwrights used ghosts as well, but mostly they were just machines, voices mouthing about vengeance. But Shakespeare took off their sheets and gave them a personality. He made them seem more like real people. Why ghosts and not like zombies or werewolves? It would have been pretty cool if Shakespeare wrote a play about vampires. This is Patrick Kilpatrick, and this has been 60 Seconds Shakespeare.
For more about the works of...
I'd watch that if Shakespeare had written about vampires or werewolves or anything else. Let's, here we are. So what you need to know before reading this is that it was written around 1601 to 1604, so like super early 17th century. The play centers around the theme of revenge. This is a revenge play. So some of you can probably go ahead and start figuring out and making inferences who's getting revenge on whom for what. It is a tragedy, and it is really his most famous play. I would say, if anything, it's probably between this and Romeo and Juliet, but Hamlet is kind of like his, it's known as like his biggest one, his probably best one. I certainly think so. So Aristotle's view of tragedy, I think we've mentioned this before in this class, when we're talking about drama, aka plays, and we refer to something as a tragedy or a comedy, it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing that we think of those terms as meaning. A comedy doesn't mean it's hilarious. It doesn't mean that there's a ton of laughs in it, although it is going to be more humorous than a tragedy. What it means is that it ends happily. A comedy just means everyone lives, everything ends happily, probably with a marriage. Tragedy, on the other hand, you can expect a lot of people to die. So a tragic hero or heroine is a character who is usually neither completely good nor completely bad, but somewhere in the middle, like most of us are. But they do have good intentions usually. And Hamlet is certainly one of those people. His intentions are at least understandable, if not always good. It's also someone who is highly renowned and prosperous, which in Aristotle's day, and Aristotle came up with the idea of tragedy versus comedy. Back then, it usually meant like a member of a royal family or someone who held a higher elevated place in society. The character, the tragic hero or heroine, is going to possess a flaw in his or her personality that's taken to an extreme and impairs their judgment. If anything, I don't know. I'm going to let you guys decide what you think is Hamlet's tragic flaw. But it leads to their own downfall, which is a major catastrophe. And one of the reasons that they usually start out as someone high in society or a noble or an aristocrat is because the higher you climb, the farther your fall is. And that just makes for good drama, to see somebody who's basically on top of the world be able to fall so far by their own design. So by the end of the play, the tragic hero recognizes their error and accepts its tragic consequences and is humbled and often dies. Revenge plays, like I mentioned, this play is part of an old tradition of revenge plays, and it was based on this legend about Hamlet, a prince whose father was killed by his uncle who then married his mother. Hamlet pretends to be mad, meaning insane or crazy, and Hamlet does that too, while plotting to avenge his father's death. In a revenge tragedy, the hero is usually called upon to punish an evildoer for a crime that's been committed, in this case, his uncle. The ghost cannot rest until it is avenged. So we know that King Hamlet will keep showing up until his death is avenged. And a revenge tragedy must end in death. We're not going to say whose, probably knowing Shakespeare, kind of a lot of people's. I think that's, yeah, everything else we already know. But I also just wanted to point out that you guys might not know this, but The Lion King is actually based on Hamlet. It's obviously very loose, as Disney adaptations tend to be. But yeah, Hamlet is obviously Simba is the son of a king who has been killed. The uncle, Scar, is evil. Now, he does not try to get with Simba's mom, except in the new adaptation, the live action, whatever it is, that came out a couple years ago. That is kind of a thing that, like, Scar and Sarabi, Simba's mom, had sort of a thing, even though she was definitely more, she wasn't into it, and Gertrude is. So that's an interesting little parallel there. That's going to be it for today. Let me exit this. I want you guys to make sure that you have a good background on what's going on in Hamlet and kind of the background and context for it. You'll have today to watch this and to work on your morality plays. I think I've already told you this in class by this point, but you'll also be able to, I will post the Wednesday discussion post tomorrow, Tuesday, so that you'll have a couple of days to work on it, since so many of you are going to be gone different days for testing. So between now and Wednesday, you only have a couple of things to accomplish. You need to watch this video and you need to do your discussion post, but then you need to work on your morality play, which is due Thursday. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you guys are excited about reading Hamlet. I know I am, and I will see you tomorrow.